Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Two Chiefs, One Mic podcast. I am Scott Hughes, one of the two chiefs who host this podcast. Chief Mike is not with us again. This is 3 podcasts in a row. He's not able to make it. I talked to him earlier today, and he is very busy right now with football season, high school football season starting off up there in Michigan, and he is busy coaching his kid. And I told him that should always be your number one priority is your family, not getting on this podcast with me. I'm retired now. I got all kinds of time. So I am excited about today's episode. Keith Grounsell is joining us today. And Keith and I met, like many of our guests have met, just kind of through LinkedIn, just, making some posts. I don't remember exactly who made the first introduction, but nonetheless, we connected. Keith talked about his book, Leadership Under Fire, and I saw the LinkedIn post, and I read some of the excerpts from it, did some research on Keith, and checked out part of the book, and I obviously bought it because it's in my hand, and I read it, and I'm going to tell you what, man, wow, what a cool book, what an easy read for a dumb cop like me, and man, what just some incredible takeaways out of here. The book's laid out really easy to read. Just can't recommend this Leadership Under Fire enough. So anyhow, Keith, welcome to the Two Chiefs, One Mic podcast, and tell everybody where you're calling in from tonight.
Yeah. First and foremost, Scott, I appreciate you having me on here and the props for my book. It's been a lifelong journey for me in law enforcement. I try and document everything I can. I'm actually calling in from overseas in the Caribbean and Haiti right now, working over here on a contract. I've spent about 8 years of my career internationally deployed, work with about 85 different countries and their national police forces. And to be honest, it's such a rewarding opportunity, to represent the United States first and foremost, but at this scale where people appreciate the professionalism behind U.S. law enforcement. That goes a long ways. And I think we take it for granted in the United States. How we're viewed outside of the U.S. is actually on a pedestal when it comes to our policing.
Yeah. What's the temperature down there?
Well, it's probably 90s. The pool's ready.
And how long you been down there? How long you been?
I've been on this contract for a year. I've been here and generally contracting. Nice. I actually wrote a book about the contracting too, Policing Beyond Borders, about guys who are interested in getting into the contracting business and what you have to do to be successful. And it's kind of a roadmap, but yeah, I've been doing this for 8 years total, and it hasn't been consistently 8 years. I went and did it, came back, became a chief investigator, chief of police. Then I went back overseas again now, and vice versa. I keep switching back and forth. I think sometimes you get that, what we call that mission bug, and you get it in your blood and you want to just go do it. And you feel like you're contributing and, you feel like there's a place for you. And I think that's always something that as a leader, you always look for a mission. And if you find that mission, that just drives you, it fuels you. And that's kind of what I find working overseas.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's back up a little bit. So walk us through your career. And then I want to jump right in this book because, man, there's some nuggets in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I'm blessed. I've worked almost 30 years now. I'm coming up on 30 years. I work for the city, county, state, federal, international, 2-time chief of police in South Carolina, a former special agent with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, spent most of my time in the Midwest, contracted, like I said, 8 years overseas, former vice narcotics officer, spent 6 years deep undercover, which was probably one of the most fun times of my career. Mm-hmm. And I've tried to write about all these things, and that's taken me some time to do. It first started out for me is writing was my therapy. When I was working deep undercover, and you have a police report and then you had an undercover report that was more detailed. Well, then I wrote another report that kind of explained some of the psychological things I was going through and the feelings I had working undercover. And I told a couple stories. I had a TV producer fly me in and film some stories. Ended up getting a TV show on A&E called Undercover Caught on Tape. Mm-hmm. It didn't take off to a second season or anything like that, but it showcased undercovers from across the U.S. There's so many great ones out there. They're behind the scene nobody hears about or anything like that. And really enjoyed telling the story. So that just forced me to write more. The book you held up, Leadership Under Fire, just became a book that I was passionate about because as a 2-time chief of police, I ran into corruption twice. So 100% of the time as a chief, I ran into it. And it wasn't me, being forced out or terminated or anything like that because my job performance, I never had a write up, never had anything. I'd never been disciplined my whole entire career. And then I get into a chief spot and all of a sudden I'm terminated. I get suspended 30 days without pay. And it's like, what is going on here? And you kind of look like the problem because that's a very public position. And for me, it was just a matter of I was asked to do some corrupt things in my first position as the chief of police and to overlook some clear violations of the law and policy and procedures. And I just flat out refused to overlook the things because I felt like I'd be put in their pocket, these politicians. And I said no, and it cost me my job. I fought for 14 months. Got my job back when a new city council was seated, and they opted to review my case, and they determined that I was actually the whistleblower, and they rescinded my termination, meaning they went back and erased it as if it didn't happen. Well, they had already promoted another chief. So he became my assistant chief, and he was a friend of mine, so it kind of worked out, but it was still a controversial thing. And I came in, and for 2 years, some political attacks happened, and the mayor who ousted me originally ended up getting indicted and convicted in a 3-day trial for crimes against moral turpitude. And he can no longer hold office ever again in the state of South Carolina, and was removed by our governor at the time, Nikki Haley. And then the head of investigations, a police officer for, at the time, I believe around 30 years, it was discovered that he had destroyed DNA evidence to cover up white suspects in a racially motivated rape and murder. That was a cold case that as a chief I had unraveled and was exposing. And that was another one of the reasons they wanted me out of there. And he ended up pleading guilty and died of a massive heart attack shortly after he pled guilty. And the chief before me was indicted for extortion, but his charges were dismissed. So he wasn't convicted of anything. And it was dismissed during pretrial. They were preparing for the case to go to trial, and they found something they didn't like. And, you know how it works in prosecutorial side. So it got dismissed. And, I came back in that 2-year window. We went from number 28 safest city in the state to number 1 in the entire state. We increased our drug arrests 287%. We created 40 plus community-based programs. We were kicking butt, taking names. It wasn't because I was great. It's because I was a leader that empowered my people. And I allowed them to be innovative. I got them the tools and the resources that they needed. They were successful. But in politics, you've been a chief. The people who are ousted or convicted, they paid to have some people run for office. They got into office and the majority shifted on me again. And if you have 4 out of 7 against you, it doesn't matter how great things are going. They tell you got to go. And so for me, I resigned and I went overseas and started contracting actually initially my first time in Haiti. And so I've had a gamut of things happen to me as a chief, and that's why I wrote about them. And there's a lot more to it than that. I tried to give some advice that I felt would help, future leaders and chiefs that are current or aspiring chiefs.
Yeah. Well, that was a lot. And I appreciate you sharing that. And, every podcast we do on this show, there's no script. There's no preloaded questions. I haven't sent you anything other than the link to log into this thing. Yeah. And I like that style better. I like having just a conversation. So you obviously mentioned a lot there. And one of the things you talked about, and I want to dive into a little bit, is you uncovered a lot of drama. I'm going to call it drama for lack of better words.
Because it was that too.
Yeah. And you fixed it. And now you're back as the chief, and you're now number 2 is a buddy of yours or a friend. So it sounds like that relationship there was no issues there. Talk about how did the culture change when you got back? Because that had to be awkward, right? For the men and women who are working there, because they don't want to go through all that nonsense, right? They just want to go out there and do their job, put bad people in jail. So absolutely. How did the culture change? I can tell you, I've shared on this program a couple times. Like when I started seeing some of the culture shift in my organization that I came into, you could feel the tension in the air.
Absolutely.
Right? Maybe walk us through kind of what that was like for you, and maybe
So
how you handled it.
The tension that you could cut with a knife, like you talked about, was my first go round as a chief. When I came back, it was kind of like, wow. he's back. He survived this. Nobody survives these 14 months of being out of work and getting full back pay coming back to work. And it kind of gave me what I thought was going to be a little bit of a honeymoon period, but it wasn't. I only had barely a slim majority of people that supported me on city council. And all I wanted to do was just come in and hard charge and just show them that under my leadership, these are some things we can accomplish. And we did accomplish them. But there was a tension. What happened was the chief that was promoted, who was a guy that was actually one of my lieutenants when I was a rookie officer way back in 1998. And we were friends, and people created a tension between us, which it was a friendship, I thought. And then they created this tension like, oh, he should be the chief. No, he should be the chief. Why are we paying two chiefs? And they created this drama, like you stated, and it created a separation. There were people that started to shift towards the number two, and then people that were with me. And then there was a group of people that were scared, like, oh, if they could fire him once, they can fire him twice. And so there was a group that was scared and wanted to protect me. And then there was a group that just thought I was going to be short time no matter what. So, I mean, I only came back and lasted 2.5 years. It really wasn't that long. But in the Chiefs world, the average chief used to last back in the day about 5 years. Now it's about 2 years or less, the average chief. I mean, you'll see turnover at some agencies 3-4 times in 5-6 years. And that's what we're seeing. So, you're 100% right.
Yeah, you see 2 or 3 chiefs in 5 or 6 years, and the department never gets settled. It never gets calm. The waters are always rough. The cops don't know who's coming or who's going. You can never get any programs in place. You got chiefs that come in, and it's hard to implement any kind of change in 2 or 3 years. And the mayor's race is up, or the city council race is up. And, we've joked before on here, and you kind of mentioned it a few minutes ago. You're one election away from someone else deciding your future. And
absolutely,
and that's insane, but that's just the world. And when people ask me, hey, I'm thinking about being a police chief, what are some things I should think about? Politics, number one, right? Politics.
Be ready to retire at any moment.
Yeah, because you're one election cycle away or you're one traffic stop away at 3:00 in the morning and the use of force going bad, and now they're coming after you because you should have done something about that. No matter how much
the buck stops at you, like you can't pass on. Yeah. So when you're the chief, it used to be when you're a captain or you're a lower rank in the command staff, you could always say, "Well, let me ask the chief." Well, you are the person where the buck stops, and you're the one who's supposed to know the answers. And if you come in indecisive and don't make decisions quickly, and as a chief, you'll make sometimes 20, 30 decisions in a given day. And if you can't make those, you don't have the confidence to make those decisions, you're not going to last. People are not going to respect you as a chief. And the thing is too, I've always been a quick decision maker, and I've always stood by my decisions, but there are some decisions, obviously, you have to think about a little bit more deeply. But for me, I felt like when I was terminated and I was waiting to get my job back, I didn't want to necessarily fight publicly, but because they made me look like I was the problem, I felt like I was backed into a corner and I had no choice but to fight. So for me, no matter what, coming back and all the accomplishments we had, I still have a black eye in my career. And no matter what, there are people that still out there think that I was the problem. They don't care about the criminal indictments and conviction. They don't care about the fact that I was never under any formal investigation. I didn't have any troubles in my entire career other than that little window as a chief of police for exposing corruption and taking a stand against it. And that's a hard part as a chief, when you stand up and you do the right thing and you get crucified and you lose everything, and you still, years later, because that was in 2012 when that occurred. And I left in 2016 in June of 2016. So I still to this day get attacked by that same group of people. And I'm very public. I've written 17 books. I'm very much out there. I don't mind telling the story. I love coming on podcasts like this because there's no script. We can just talk raw and real. And that's the way I've always been. I always wanted to do everything public. I wanted a public hearing. I wanted all those things. They denied all that because they wanted to do everything behind closed doors.
So you come back as chief after this debacle, and you mentioned one of the things you mentioned was you went from 28th safest city to number 1, I think was the number you gave. And I suspect, you invested in your people. You probably were giving them training and you were giving them the resources and the tools that they need to do their job and training up your supervisor and training up your staff. Did you find were there some people that when you came back realized, oh boy, I'm in the wrong camp. And if I don't get on board, this isn't going to end well for me. And I think you talked about, there was people create some internal drama. How did you navigate those waters? Because internal terrorists are the worst.
Man,
right?
they will
You don't know
hijack your ship in a heartbeat. And for me,
Yeah.
both agencies I went into as a chief were 35% understaffed. One was 38, almost 40% understaffed. And people were either going to get on board and be a part of it. And my role was to create division. I tried to get leadership to buy in first, and then we tried to push it down to the rest of the line officers all the way down. And that was very, very important. I had a frenzy of excitement, coming back as a chief because I created this vision of I'm a cop's cop. I was a young chief. I was in my mid 30s, and that's a super young chief to come into an agency that was at one time, it was the fastest growing city in the United States. It was in the Southern Home Magazine as one of the greatest places to live. I mean, it was prosperous and booming. So I was super excited to be a part of that. And I created this vision that people wanted to come. I had guys taking demotions and up to $10,000 pay cuts. And in South Carolina, when you don't make a whole lot, $10,000 is a lot of money. They would come over just to work for the organization because they knew I had their back as long as they did the right thing. I mean, I'm hardcore. I hold you accountable and I will push you and you will accomplish things like you've never imagined you could do, but I'll hold you accountable along the way. But if you make an honest mistake, I always ask what your intentions were. So if I find out somebody screwed up and you had good intentions and it was a mistake, that's one we can make it through that. It's not going to be a problem. But you know how it is as a chief. Don't lie to me, number one. And then always give me all the information. So if I'm going to bat for you, I don't want to find out something later on that you did that you didn't even tell me about. And it really had helped. I was 100% fully staffed in 6 months in both agencies. I had a waiting list of certified officers. My whole entire tenure, I had a full staff. Now, granted, some of the turnovers are a little bit higher because they were scared as a chief like I am, that's not scared to be out there and do things, that I was probably going to get ousted. And some people saw the writing on the wall before I even actually saw it. And for me, I just came in, did the right thing, and realized as a chief of police, you could be ousted for nothing. You don't have to do anything wrong. There could be a personality conflict. Somebody doesn't like the way your hair's cut. I mean, it could literally be anything. We're at will state. We have no unions or anything like that in South Carolina. So there's zero protections for a chief of police. And there's no contracts for us. We don't get, I tried to get a contract, but obviously that was quick. I paid an attorney $5,000 to negotiate a contract when I came back, and they released my pre-contract demands and said, look at Grounsell trying to strong arm us. And they just destroyed me all over the media. My attorney said, you might want to just back off on the contract. Just be grateful you got your job. And I said, I agree with that. And unfortunately, that was the way it went.
Yeah, I was lucky here. I had a contract. And in fact, I was in my 40s when I became a chief. And I reached out to some mentors of mine around the country before I took the job. And they said, don't take the job without a contract if you can get one.
Amen.
And, that was a kind of a prerequisite for me. Now, they didn't have to honor it. They chose to because they wanted me. And I had no problem renewing it. In fact, I had just renewed it for a couple of years when I told them, hey, I'm not going to live out my last contract. And they were like, what? I said, well, things have changed.
Leave on your terms, brother.
Amen, man. Amen. Leave on your terms. When things are going good and the place is good, you hand it off to the next guy or gal and they can just run with it. And they're in good hands right now. But, you think about all you've gone through and the books you've written. When you think about the books you've written, think about this one, Leadership Under Fire. What part of this book is your favorite? Or what one brings back, I don't know, memories or lessons learned? Or what would you want an aspiring chief or a new chief to know in this particular book?
So something that was told to me that really protected me when I was a lead investigator for the largest prosecutor's office in the state of South Carolina, the solicitor who's, the DA or whatever you want to call him in other states, gave me some advice. And he told me when I went in as a new chief, do an audit of your property and evidence room. And I was like, yeah, okay. And then I called the state law enforcement division right when I found out I was going to be the chief, invited them in. I told the city administrator and the mayor, and they were very upset with me. They said, why are you drawing attention to yourself? Why are you doing these things? And I pushed through. I had an audit. It took almost a week for them to do an audit. I think they had 5 agents that came in. Well, we ended up getting like a 3,000 page report of all the evidence. So I'm inheriting as a chief evidence dating over 100 years. And I wanted a clean slate from this point forward. I'm responsible for everything. But the stuff before me, I can't be held responsible for it. And I'll tell you how important that audit was, that advice was. Later on, when they indicted the mayor for public corruption, he tried to point the finger that I was the one who destroyed evidence. And in the case where the head of investigations for 30 years took the DNA evidence out, signed it out as if he was bringing it to the state crime lab and actually destroyed it. Well, the evidence was missing, and that was determined on my audit. It was one of thousands of pieces of evidence, and we never checked when it was said it was signed out. We just assumed it made it to the lab. Well, when they researched it, it never made it to the lab, so it was lost in between checking it out and bringing it to the state DNA crime lab. So for me, I realized, wow, the magnitude of getting advice from somebody and actually me heeding that advice and doing it protected me, because they literally tried to say that I did that. And it was 7 years before I became chief. If it wasn't for that paper trail that I did, I believe they would have tried to indict me and come after me. And I feel like it's one of my favorite pieces. It's not a big piece, but it's one of my favorite pieces of probably dozens of lessons just like that are found in Leadership Under Fire in that book. And it was because I listened. So my whole point was to write a book so people will hopefully listen to the things I've been through and take that advice and do something that will protect you, do something that will make your role easier than it was for me, and maybe prevent you from being terminated or being scrutinized or whatever it can do. I just want to help others.
It's so funny you said that, because when I took over as chief in 2016, we had the exact thing. A complete evidence room audit was done.
Nice.
Every month they did an audit. Every year they did an audit. And when I left, the day before I left, another complete audit. And we went through some remodeling when I was there, and we updated our systems and things. And they put a new alarm panel on the building, or on the room to get in. And then there was a separate alarm on the weapons locker and all these alarms. And they're like, Chief, your code's going to be, I said, whoa, no. Stop. I said, I don't want a code. I don't want a code to that room. I don't want a key to that room.
Yes.
I don't want anything to do with that evidence or property room, because to your point, Keith, do a Google search on police chief indicted or police department under fire, whatever the case may be, and how many times is it a property room or evidence room? Evidence is missing. Property room is missing. I don't know why more agencies don't either contract with some company to do it or call a neighboring department and say, hey, will you come over and just give me an annual audit? That is a phenomenal piece of advice. I'm so glad you brought that up. Anybody who becomes a chief, that should be a must.
Yeah, no, I did the exact same thing you did. I didn't want a code. I didn't want access. And if I went in there, there was always a witness and I signed in. And I would stand outside the door. If they needed us, as a chief, I didn't really need to go in there.
I wasn't to be in there
prosecuting cases or anything like that. So for me, I tried to stay away. And we went through a move as well, my second time as chief of police. And I called the state law enforcement division in, and my evidence custodian was very wishy-washy about not wanting to audit, and he pushed that audit off until I was gone, literally. And I called the state, and it just never got done. And that bothered me the whole entire time there. And I making sure everything's good, because you can do a pre-internal audit to make sure you're prepared. It's not to catch anybody with their pants down. It's just a system of checks and balances to make sure every little piece of evidence is accounted for, so we can successfully prosecute cases for the victims and their families.
We'll do body cam reviews. We'll do dash cam reviews. Why would you not do an audit of your property room? And we spend how much time doing reviews on other stuff that's much less, impactful, if you will. But hey, listen, in chapter 16, it's called, and I love this chapter, Encouraging Positive Culture Through Celebrating Successes. And one thing that I know I've pushed as a chief, and whenever I teach or speak, I always talk about we need to spend more time recognizing the positives in our officers and our employees than the amount of time we do recognizing the negatives. Like as a boss,
Absolutely.
sergeant, lieutenant, captain, deputy chief, you see your people doing good stuff all the time, but we suck at recognizing positive performance. Tell me about that chapter.
Yeah, if it's in that chapter or not, I don't remember, but it's something that really sticks when you brought that up was my last role, like my last duty or responsibility I did as chief of police the second time in the first agency when I was forced out the second time is I knew I was gone and I knew they had a meeting in a few hours. I wrote 2 commendations up. That was my last duty that I did as a chief. I wrote 2 commendations to go in the personnel files for a couple of officers that did outstanding undercover work, and we arrested 54 people in 12 hours for a human trafficking sting. And I took a lot of scrutiny for it because they said I made the town look like it had a human trafficking problem. And I made sure they had this outstanding write-up in their files before I left. But my whole entire time there as chief of police, I started a program called the Top Cop program. It was a points-based incentive program where we tracked everything, but yet we incentivized with higher points things we wanted them to do, like community policing, busting drug dealers, making good cases, successful prosecution. I didn't incentivize writing traffic tickets, anything like that. I could get a warning kind of the same as a ticket. It didn't matter to me. But I had a Top Cop wall. As you walked in the front lobby, every single month, each shift had a top cop named, and every shift had a hierarchy, and we had leaders of the pack, and you had that shift, and it was a prestigious thing. But what I did is I recognized on a consistent basis. I didn't overkill it, but I made sure that there was a ton of positives in their personnel file. And I felt like if you do that, and that officer makes that mistake where they're going to get written up for something, which, most people do in their career at least once, when they do, that one write-up is going to be trumped by 15 or 20 positive commendations. And I felt that was very, very important for me as a leader to show them I wanted to focus on the positive instead of the negative. Although there are consequences, it's not always a negative if it's constructively done.
Right. Someone told me a long time ago, number one intrinsic motivator with people is positive recognition. And if you want your people to do good work, you got to recognize it when they do it. Because I'll tell you what, if they're late for court, or if they miss a detail, an off-duty job, or they back their car into a light pole, we're going to be real quick to throw a piece of paper in front of them. And I've heard sergeants, which just disgust me, who just talk about, I'll just write them up. I'll write them up. I'll write them up. Well, all that's doing is beating down morale, destroying the culture. You're not making anybody better, leading, air quotes, leading that way. That doesn't do anything. And there's different levels of positive recognition, right? I mean, you talked about writing formal commendations, and I don't disagree. You shut down a human trafficking ring with 54 bad guys in 12 hours going to jail. We need to recognize that. But you may have somebody who, a simple text message, like a simple text, hey, attaboy, good work, good arrest, good traffic stop. Appreciate how much time you spent with that victim of that crime. Like, that goes a long way with people, man. People just want to know you're paying attention. Absolutely. You see what they're doing out there. And the higher up you go, it's hard sometimes for us to hear and see everything. So I put a lot of that on the sergeants, right? That's the first line supervisors. They need to be doing that daily, right?
It's such an important role, field training officers, corporals, sergeants. That is the future. If your FTOs are horrible and they don't represent where you want to take the organization, and they're teaching bad habits to your rookie that just got out of the academy, then your agency is going to fail. It may not fail right there, but it's going to slowly start failing. So teaching leadership, to me, a big part of that is teaching mentoring, advising, and coaching. And you said something that really hit with me just a second ago about that sergeant that just wanted to write them up all the time. Well, I've seen that too. And that sergeant is the problem. They think they're good because nobody does anything wrong on their shift because they're ruling with the iron fist. But in actuality, that takes a lot more effort all the time to constantly be writing people up than put all the motivation, all the effort on the front end, mentor, advise, coach, to where they learn how to do it the proper way. And then you can take a step back because they're going to do the right thing because they were taught the right way. And then they're going to pass that on. Yeah. So laziness creates discipline through management through discipline. Leadership takes patience, takes coaching and mentorship in order to be successful.
Yeah, you talk about FTOs, and I still joke about this, although it's sad we have to joke about it. But, there's organizations out there who, if you look at who's FTO and the new kids, it's the most disgruntled POS
Yes.
employee in the organization. And it's mind-boggling to me why you would, as a leader, you would put someone that doesn't want to be there, hates their job, hates their life, hates everything, terrible at officer safety, dodges reports, just everything that we don't want. These are the people that you put in a car to train the next generation of cops. And then you wonder sometimes, why is it that we're not getting any better? Well, we have to look at the decisions that we're making that got us there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the union contract says that the senior guys can bid on it, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's a problem. Like, you got to get that out of the contract somehow, because that's not making the organization better. But anyhow.
Yeah.
But you wrote a book about that, did you not?
Yeah.
About FTOs specifically?
It's actually, I focused on leadership for FTOs, but it's actually my hottest selling book right now. Out of all 17 books, that is definitely the hottest sell. I just think people are hungry. FTOs love to teach, so they're natural leaders, as long as you weren't voluntold.
The good ones.
To be,
good ones.
As long as you wanted to be the FTO and you busted your tail to get in that position by demonstrating the proper techniques, how to be a leader, those are the ones that are buying the book. They're the hungry ones. And really, I wanted to focus on the leadership component of being an FTO, in addition to all the different things you have to do as an FTO. And that book is just, surprisingly, it really took off. And I wasn't really expecting that from that book. I just expected to go the normal pace as all my books. And that one just really has been a hot seller since I pushed it out in the last couple months.
Well, you think about it, Keith. I mean, look at where we are since 2020. Look at the recruiting, look at the retention, look at the number of retirements that have occurred. So you've got a group of people now that are filling these FTO roles who may be more educated. They're looking at things with a different perspective. They recognize, hey, if I want to be the best, if I want to stay out of hot water, if I want to, be a good cop that people look up to, I need to get educated on this stuff. And that's where your book and other trainings, kind of come into play. So kudos for the book taking off at a rate that you didn't expect, because I think it might speak to who's coming up behind us, because I've always said too, good cops always make a good FTO. Bad cop, always going to be a bad FTO. If you're a good cop, there's a good chance you're going to be, good cop, good FTO, probably going to be a good sergeant, because you're exhibiting the same qualities just with one person in the car as opposed to leading a squad. So, well, listen, Keith.
And I appreciate it, man. This has been fun.
How do people, if they want to get a hold of you, they want to check out your book? I know you do some trainings. Let's talk about it. How do people get a hold of you?
So the best way to get a hold of me is like we got a hold of each other. Just message me on LinkedIn. I'm always open to talking to anybody, but I also have a website. It's called IGILacademy.com, Institute of Global Integrity and Leadership. And on there, I have all of my books. In addition to that, I've created the book that you talked about, Leadership Under Fire, is actually an online, self-paced, interactive course. It's a 2-day course, and it has all the lessons from the book. And actually, at the end of each lesson, you have to listen to a part of the book. And it goes chapter by chapter throughout the whole entire book and goes a step further with some of the leadership lessons. So that's something that's relatively new. It's I say a 2-day equivalent, 12-hour course. You can take it over the course of 60 days. If you don't have hardly any time. It's self-paced. You can complete it as long as you want to take. But I feel like that's probably the future of training, is creating something where people can take it and they don't have to go travel somewhere. Mm-hmm. So I'm developing an undercover, deep cover school online as well. And just check out my website, IGILacademy.com, and you'll find all my books are on Amazon as well. They're all available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook. And some of them are coming out in hardcovers, and some are in French and English. I'm just trying to hit a gamut of different audiences.
Good for you, brother. Well, listen, Keith, appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your day, jumping on the Two Chiefs One Mic podcast. It's been an honor to have you on here. Look forward to reading some more of your books.
Amen. Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
All right, brother. Take care.